meeting is concluded. We welcome the use of Welsh language at this meeting, and I've had no requests for people to speak Welsh today. So this meeting will be conducted in English only. Please, can members refrain from using the chat function instead of raising hand icon to indicate when they want to speak? And please remember to keep your microphone muted when you're not taking place. Please do not interrupt discussions until you have been notified of intention to speak and you have been invited to do so. Moving on to the agenda. We welcome Bethan McPherson, Head of Services and Communities and Renewal. And we thank Bethan and Councillor Gordon. Okay, sorry. Right, the first item on the agenda. Chris, do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we do. Apologies from Councillors Liam Cowles, Caroline Price, Sue Malson and Nicholas Simons. Thanks.
Rebecca, do we have any declarations of interest?
Thank you, Chair. I haven't had any notification from any members previous to the meeting commencing of any declarations, so unless you think of anything during discussions, then please do notify us at the time. Thank you.
Rebecca, could we run through the action sheet?
Minutes.
So the minutes?
Yeah.
Yep. Members, to remind you that these are the minutes of the remaining scrutiny item S106. Could you please state whether you have anything to raise in relation to these minutes? If not, I will take these as agreed. No? You okay? Thank you. Item 4. Rebecca, could you please run through the action sheet?
Thank you, Chair. So, members, as you'll see there, the first action on the action sheet is in relation to a meeting that took place with the previous committee and the previous council, looking at serious violence and the new duty that was due to come in. It wasn't enacted until last week. There was a delay in enacting the duty, but it has now been enacted. I've spoken to Kate Williams, the officer in charge of that, and so we will be looking to get a seminar in place for you now in the near future, as well as a number of other activities she was setting out to me. In regards to the other two actions then, there was an action with regards to further information on Section 106 contributions, which you received that information prior to Christmas, and also you received the responses to the recommendations as well, which are now attached as an appendix to the action sheet. So unless you have any questions or any feedback you'd like me to give to officers or the exec member, Chair, that's all
Thank you.
me.
So, agenda item 5. I'd like to welcome Bethan McPherson, Head of Services and Communities and Renewal, and Councillor Joe Gordon, Executive Member for Communities and Skills in Regeneration, who will be introducing this report today. And Rebecca, I welcome you as your first time in this report position. I also share that same situation, so we're happy on that one. Before I ask for you to come in, I would like to express my thanks to the committee, Dr. John Cox, Chair of the British Legion Liaison Group, who attended the pre-meeting yesterday to provide us with the valuable information ahead of this morning's meeting. I now hand over to Councillor Gordon and Bethan to give their brief introduction to the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I can just say thank you for our invite today and the opportunity to attend as well. Members will be aware from the report that we co-designed the master plan with the community in 2018 to regenerate the British site. The British is one of our prized green assets in Torfaen, but also as one of the largest post-industrial mining sites in South East Wales. Our initial priority has been to make the site safe with Phase 1 works to identify and remediate the priority hazards and create a watercourse. At site visit in autumn 2021, many of us were awed by the natural beauty of the site. A visit to the site brings home our duty to deliver on our commitments, opening up opportunities for health and well-being for our communities. The master plan also focuses on employment and volunteer opportunities, improving biodiversity and increasing awareness of the site's heritage. I'm keen to receive your assessment on the delivery of the master plan and if this will achieve our aspirations for the site, and I look forward to your recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. So, in response to the main report, which you've obviously had a copy of, I'll just provide an overview summary for you. So, the purpose of the report is to provide an outline of the current programme of work that is being delivered in terms of the aspirations of the Council and the community in respect of the British site, and the associated master plan, which Councillor Gordon has referred to, which was developed and adopted in 2018. So the British site was purchased in 2016 and the master plan therefore produced thereafter, with 10 opportunity areas identified. In terms of the current work packages, there are 3 primary packages that we are currently delivering in line with that master plan. And they are, in summary, phase 1, the capital works to address some of the highest priority shafts and adits that are on the site and develop a surface watercourse in response to that. The current work is around the geotechnical site investigations and remediation works, which are currently ongoing within this financial year and should be concluded shortly, to then lead on to some soil analysis, which in turn will inform the detailed design works that will follow thereafter. So the design, planning, tender and implementation to redirect the stream out of the existing ageing culvert system and into a new surface river channel we'll be looking to take forward during the next financial year, 23-24, and potentially into 24-25. The funding available to support this are in place and based on cost estimates that were produced in 2019. So we have a total budget of just shy of £8 million available to deliver that, and that's from a mixed funding source of council, VVP Recycled grant from Welsh Government and the NRO funding also, as detailed in the main report. The second element of current work is around the complementary programme of community activity and engagement and participation at the site, and that's been developed in partnership with the Gwent Wildlife Trust, and that's an ongoing piece of work that will continue in line with the NRO funding through to June 23. To date, there have been over 100 participants in those events, activities, and they've been quite broad and wide-ranging, as you'll see from the report. The report does mention that there was a resource implication with the Gwent Wildlife Trust officer leaving. The new officer has now been recruited and will be commencing post this month, and his name is Kevin Donovan, so that will allow us to pick up the momentum there. That programme of engagement activity is obviously enhanced further by some consultation activity that's been undertaken by the team, most recently in October, which linked to the initiation of the GI works on site. And then there is broader sort of engagement work with key stakeholders with a vested and concerned interest in the site. I think critically it's about retaining that engagement and ensuring that continues through every sort of key milestone of the delivery moving forward. The third and final element that we're currently involved with is the work linked to Idris, who were the selected company chosen to take forward some feasibility work at the site to explore the broader opportunities. They were selected based on the comprehensive proposal and the opportunity to explore the site as a whole, as opposed to focusing in on a single element. In terms of their broad timeline, they are currently seeking to secure funding through green bonds to enable us to deliver that feasibility work. So that cost will be met through themselves. There are no cost implications to the authority. That will allow a period of approximately 6 months of feasibility studies, and then following that, so sort of later in the summer of 23, a report will be prepared to inform the next steps. Obviously, if feasible and there's sort of valid justification and rationales in terms of the projects being proposed, there would then be ongoing conversations in terms of the council involvement in supporting the delivery of that, potentially through a community interest company. Hopefully this provides a comprehensive overview of the current planned activity and how that aligns with the broader master plan and the longer term aspirations for the community in developing that site as a whole. And I would invite any questions.
So I now invite individual members to ask questions as per list distributed. Rebecca? Yeah. So I think the first question comes from Councillor Gordon. I'd like to break this up into 2 sections of progress and timescales, and then we follow on talking about community engagement. Okay, so the first question comes from Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome, Bethan. The progress since we've purchased, the council purchased the site, has been sort of significantly delayed by some cost increases, and of course the COVID pandemic has affected all walks of facets of life, including development of the British. How significantly delayed are we? And is there any scope to make some progress and catch up on the timeline.
Yeah, I think sort of the period following, getting used to that, isn't it? Following the period when the initial proposal was drafted up, and then obviously the cost escalations and COVID, there was a period where we needed to go back for further funding, etc. Where we are currently, I think since work has commenced on site at the tail end of last year, work has progressed broadly to timeline. So I think we are operating to quite a tight timeline, and there have been no significant delays within that work programme. I think we've got a level of confidence in terms of the timeline that's set out within the report going forward. We have Captain engaged in terms of the detailed design work that will be taken forward. And obviously ensuring then planning is submitted, which we're aiming for September. So I think where there's any opportunity to expedite that timeline, we will look at it. But I think at this point in time, we can be quite assured that the timeline is pretty robust. Obviously, once we go up to tender, I think that will give us a level of certainty in terms of the actual implementation phase, both in terms of cost, but the delivery timeline for that. So I think that's when we'll get a greater level of assurance in terms of the work beyond the design phase. In terms of the work being undertaken by Idris, they have provided us with quite a detailed timeline in terms of undertaking that feasibility work. I think it's quite reassuring that that'll be undertaken within sort of a 6-month period, which will allow us then as a council to sort of determine what's come back and sort of assess that, so we're not waiting a prolonged period of time before then we can explore the next phase of that. I think it's just keeping the community engaged and involved throughout that process. So I think where we can, we will expedite the timeline, but what I would say is we're on quite a robust timeline currently, and we're seemingly delivering to that.
I've got the first question for me. So the investigation works carried out ongoing, due for completion at the end of January. Were these works completed on schedule? That's on 3.8.
Yes, so that's the works that are imminently, so we're slightly behind, but only by a couple of weeks, so they'll be concluded imminently, and then they will sort of be sent off then for the detailed soil analysis for the end of March, which will then allow the detailed design to commence to time. Okay.
Thank you. We're going to move to Councillor Borden.
Me again, cool. Thanks for your previous answer. You mentioned Idris and the partnership with them. Can you put some colour on what the pros and cons of that approach is, please? A little bit further information about Idris and what they do, and how much it's costing to engage with them, and what we're hoping to achieve through partnering with them. I think the report suggests that they're a feasibility study in the first instance, but what the pros and cons of Idris and the partnership with the local authority. Thank you.
Okay. So I'll do my best, and potentially, if I don't answer everything, there may be an opportunity to them maybe to come in and present to members at a future date. But essentially, I think there have been a number of interests previously in terms of the site, especially around sort of energy and how we sort of generate energy from the site. The other proposals that we've received were quite singular in their focus. I think the benefit of Idris is that they're proposing a more holistic view across the site. They're looking at energy, but also employment opportunity, building infrastructure, sort of whole package, which then lends itself more to that wider master plan. I think the other benefit is that they're looking for us to explore some kind of joint venture arrangement, so that could be like a community interest company. So again, that opportunity for us as a council to have a say and a sway in terms of that balance between commercial and community, to ensure that, if we're developing a commercial element, how does that generate a wide gain across the community? So I think that's a further benefit of them. In terms of the company, they are very they do have a website, but their website talks very much about sort of being based and sort of founded in the community for social gain, social value, as well as energy and sort of that comprehensive package around employment, the environment and community, as opposed to being a single focus then, purely around profit. So I think those are some of the benefits. And do you mind just repeating the second bits of the questions? I think I've missed.
How much is it costing to engage
So in terms of the feasibility studies, etc., that cost is being met 100% by Idris. The cost to us as an authority will come in terms of us entering into any agreements or the memorandum of understanding. There'll obviously be legal fees, etc. I think they are to be determined, so we'd need to fetch them back in at the appropriate time. Similarly then, once those feasibility study works are concluded, they will present a report to us that will allow us then to consider what our involvement is as a council going forward and what that would mean, again, by cost in terms of entering into formal arrangements. But again, we would have Idris seeking the investment to take forward those development proposals.
Yeah, just a supplementary on that. So the feasibility study is cost neutral, but we don't know yet if we decide to sustain our relationship with Idris, what the cost will be.
Yeah.
So do you envisage, again, once we've got costings and whatever, it being brought back to scrutiny to be ticked off? Because I think we can't, I don't think we're in the position where we can write a blank cheque at this point based on some sort of future fee arrangement which we're not aware of.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The feasibility studies are being met by Green Bonds, and that's been sourced wholly and 100% by Idris. They then present a report back in with their proposals, and then that would come back into council for consideration.
Just add is that the fees for external financial and legal advice, I would envisage that going to an exec member report for resources. Obviously, our legal team would advise where it needs to go, whether it be cabinet or council or an exec member decision.
Councillor Thomas, you'd like to come in?
Yeah, just quickly, maybe I've missed it. Do you know what we've spent with Idris at the moment? What we paid them?
We haven't paid Idris anything. There's no. They're doing this essentially at risk. They believe there's a business case to be made. So we are providing a licence for them to occupy the site, to come and make those investigations and studies. But that's not at a cost to the authority other than legal fees associated with agreements.
Okay. Councillor Thomas, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Lovely. So the next question comes from Councillor Yowell, but unfortunately he's not here, so I guess I can ask you that question. RS proposes does not cover the 10 opportunities in the master plan. Will there be scope to cover the gaps? Alternatively, will be looking to explore opportunities down the line to fill all 10 of those opportunities?
I think obviously the immediate work that we're doing is around sort of making that site safer. So, you know, that's an essential priority. And yeah, totally take on board that what Idris are proposing won't necessarily cover all of the 10. What we don't know yet is what elements it could or couldn't cover. So I think the first stage is obviously to conclude those initial studies and then see what opportunities they bring so that we can identify where those gaps are. Obviously, further development in line with the master plan would be subject to us identifying a rationale, a business case and funding to support that. So I think as a council, we're probably committed to trying to deliver the master plan in full. But I think recognition as well that that master plan was produced a period of time. So I think there is that ongoing review of the master plan. But for me, I think concluding the immediate pieces of work will inform where we go in terms of future direction.
Thank you, Bethan. So, next question is about 3.1, sorry, by 3.3. Phase 1, capital works to be addressed to the highest priorities, shafts and audits. Have we assessed the water coming from these audits, and is there any cross-contamination of water that is in the environmental, what is the environmental impact on this?
I think that's probably one I will need to defer and get some information from the team. I wouldn't want to commit to saying that we have or haven't done that. If that's okay, I'll take that one back to the team and come back with a response.
Yes, thank you. Sure, please come in.
I'm not sure if it would help, but the soil report would be at the end of March, so there may be more information on that then.
Okay. Councillor Thomas, would you like to come in?
Thanks, Chair. At our pre-meeting yesterday, we spoke with Dr. John Cox of the British Liaison Committee, he made it pretty clear that the aspirations of for the British was for it to be a cleaner and greener site. How soon can we start delivering on this?
I think probably some of the work that we're already undertaking in terms of the redesign of the watercourse will be a start in terms of that agenda. Obviously, it's not just about making safe, but it's the channeling of that water. I think the work that Idris is doing as well, there's an energy focus there about sort of using local energy within the site and then regenerating it out in terms of any after use. So I think we're probably already on that journey. I think it's probably just continued engagement to explore further opportunities as we move forward.
Just on that one of the sort of things that Dr. Cox and the liaison group mentioned yesterday was questioning why we haven't undertaken some of the smaller aspects of the plan. So, as an example, the sort of the access via the big arch, why has the tarmac been laid and that bit been done? Because that's a small piece, but it is viewed as very achievable in the short term and give sort of residents sort of some sense of progress, at least before the bigger ticket items are sort of dealt with. So any sort of the small stuff we can do in the sort of short to medium term.
Can I add to that? I actually visited the site the other week. We've got, as you go through the tunnel, I recognise that what Councillor Gordon's saying about tarmac. There is a walkway in, but on the left-hand side there is a lot of boulders in the area, and they've been put there because people were actually using. I think they broke down the fence, and it was to stop motorbikes coming through. Is this the best way forward to actually prevent that happening?
Okay, so in terms of the smaller scale projects, I believe, my understanding is that obviously the funding that's been made available has been made for a specific purpose, and for us primarily to understand that site in a little bit more detail from, in terms of where the mines and the adits are, so that, that's a safety measure to ensure that any future development that takes place on that site is in the correct places, and obviously we can protect the public. So I think that's probably the rationale as to why that sort of piece of work has been prioritised, along with the new watercourse for the same reason, making sort of key parts of the site safe, isn't it, allows us to progress and explore other opportunities. I think probably we need further exploration in terms of those smaller scale projects. I guess is ensuring that we avoid some piecemeal approaches potentially, and if we're talking about improving access, etc., should that be more of a comprehensive package? That's not to say we couldn't go away and have some conversations, but ultimately it would come down to funding, prioritisation of resource, etc. So I think it just needs to link holistically back to that master plan and trying to develop a comprehensive offer in the long term.
Thank you, Bethan. David, would like to come in?
Yeah, just quickly, thanks, Chair. So how long have Idris been involved in the British now? And what have they actually done so far?
So we engaged with them just before Christmas. I think it was late in the autumn. I can get the exact date for you. We met most recently with them a couple of weeks ago. So they've essentially been exploring that investment through green bonds for the feasibility study work. So I think they've had favourable conversations, and they were hoping to get a determination of that sort of now. We've not had sort of confirmation either way, so that's something we can chase. So obviously once they've secured the funds through the green bonds, the next stage then will be a licence to occupy and undertake feasibility. So at this stage it's been those initial tentative conversations and a programme of planned work, so they're not actually sort of on site.
So they haven't done anything at the moment. So since 2016, what have we done up there, and who's done it?
So yeah, Idris's involvement is far more recent, so yeah, that's them. Obviously the work that's happened on site so far is predominantly linked to the GI works, the site investigations, etc., which obviously commenced last year. Obviously the period since 2016 when we purchased the site, there's a period whereby we needed to apply for funding, secure funding, and I appreciate, as it's reflected in the report, there was a period of sort of 2 years where we had the pandemic, etc. The need to reevaluate the costs and resubmit the funding application. So there has been a period where activity has been low, but during that we have been sort of sourcing and securing funding. And I think just reiterating the point, from the point when we've had the funding in place, we have sort of mobilised, you know, at pace in terms of progressing those works.
So just so I'm clear, we bought it in 2016. We haven't physically done anything up there apart from site investigations. Is that right?
It's essentially been around, yes, surveying the site, understanding where those mines and adits are, and I think.
Come in, Jo.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to say that the Phase 1 works are, I suppose, the precursor to the whole master plan project. Without the Phase 1 works to clean and green the site, to make it safe, to allow it to vegetate as well, to allow it to be safer for our communities to walk up on the site without falling in ridges that the water has ridden, you know, broke the soil down. That's the foundation, isn't it? So Phase 1 is the foundation for everyone else to build on.
So, sorry, Chair, will I be right in saying then the cost, the money that we've spent so far up there would just be on the investigations of the site, nothing physical?
Small-scale remediation where things have been identified, but yeah, essentially this is about investigations. And
would you like to come in, Councillor Gordon?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, looking at the sort of 11-point aspirations we've got at the end of the report, the food growing zone and the trekking centre and all, which is all fantastic. When we spoke to Dr. Cox from the liaison group yesterday, point 6, potential development areas, was, I believe, what we're calling these days a red flag. The situation is we've got a housing crisis. We understand that. And we do need more houses in Torvine. I think I'd like some flavour of why the potential sites on the British weren't in the local development plan, but now reappear, if you like, in the replacement LDP, because this would be an issue, like I say, a red flag, if you like, for the liaison group and residents and all the rest of it. If we're serious about making this clean, green, and a sort of a wonderful site, and it ties in with the Blaenavon stuff and about the Visit Torvine and the tourism and all the rest of it, why are we putting houses on there? Why are we proposing residential developments on this particular spot? If you could just give us some light on that, please.
okay. So this is the potential development areas that are most likely to be able to accommodate building foundations. So I think probably I'd have to come back to you in terms of the LDP comment and sort of the change. Did you want to come in? Sorry, Jo.
Yeah. So, if I remember rightly, in our replacement local development plan, there were 3 parcels of land submitted as candidate sites when there was a call out for them. The one covers an area of land that is ancient woodland, so that was rejected, and the other 2 to the east of the site, those dwellings, if they were built, would be there'd be a great risk of flooding. So they were rejected as candidate sites. So the expectation is that they wouldn't be in our replacement local development plan for housing on the site.
Okay, thank you.
Just to add to that, obviously part of the work that Idris is doing is looking at where potential development can happen, and that's just about building footprints, but that could be for employment-related development and would link into sort of that whole energy and reuse of energy on the site, etc. So I think at this stage there's been no explicit conversations around housing development. I think it's recognising the constraints of the site, and that's very much about this initial feasibility work, and what that is looking to determine is kind of what is and isn't achievable on that site, and none of that would be progressed until it came back in for a full consideration by the council.
Councillor Thomas, would you like to come in?
Too many Newbies. Right. Dr. Cox mentioned the potential for hydroelectric at the site, as well as Idris raising this. Has there been any consideration by officers for hydroelectricity?
Not specifically by us. Obviously, Idris have identified areas that they are considering under that, and just bear with me 2 seconds. So they've spoken about green energy, hydrogen production, the aquaculture development. Again, the detail of that to be determined, but we've, as officers, have had no specific investigations into that area.
Would you like to answer the next question, please, Councillor?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. How much has been spent to date? How much is planned on being spent to achieve the aspirations for the British? And have we factored in the level of job creation and sustainability from delivering on the aspirations? The site was purchased by the Council in 2016, and there's a very drawn-out timeline. Is this going to end up costing a lot more because of the prolonged nature of the timeline?
Sorry. They're referred to in section 6 in terms of the funding package that we've currently got secured, so that's the 7.9 million. Spend prior to March 22 was 1.2, with a further 2.4 allocated in this current financial year, and the anticipation is we'll spend that in full. So obviously that 7.9 million relates to the phase 1 works that are outlined in the report. Currently, there is no sort of secured funding beyond that in terms of implementation. So any future development would be subject to securing further funding. Similarly, with the Idris proposal, their feasibility studies, if proved viable, the idea is that they would lever in additional investment, which, could be multi-millions. I think that's to be determined, isn't it? So I think we can only sort of make consideration to what we've secured and delivered so far. And then, ultimately, there's still an aspiration to deliver that master plan, but it's securing appropriate funding in which to do it, and that's why we're exploring different avenues through which.
Okay, so the benefit of anyone that hasn't got the report in front of them, the 1.2 million is what we spent so far, yeah? Mm-hmm. So could you tell us what that 1.2 million has been spent on, please?
Yeah, so that was the initial survey work, and I'll just find the relevant section for you in the report. Bear with. So within section 3 of the report, there were some initial studies undertaken by Capita, which was around preliminary site source reports. So that was sort of really homing in terms of where potential mines and adits were. That obviously then forms the more detailed and technical elements that come beyond it. There is potentially staffing costs also wrapped up in that, obviously because we're funding from NRO for staffing and delivery of community engagement activities as well.
So the 1.2 million spent so far, just want to be clear, because back in 2016, if anyone's read the original report when the council bought the site, apparently we knew the risks. So the 1.2 million that we spent so far has only been spent on surveys and staff for those surveys. Is that right?
Yes,
nothing physical?
Nothing physical, no.
Okay.
Thank you. So the next 2 questions are from Councillor Yole, and because he's not here, I will ask you these questions. The first one is on 3.5. It's following the procurement of exercise, Capital were appointed to design the scheme. Can you comment on the cost and the efficiency of Capital's contract and whether it achieved what it expected, please? Thank you.
Oh, Councillor Yoles just joined.
Good morning, Councillor Yoles. I've just asked your question, so you can answer the next question, which is after Beth has made the comment on number 12. Thank you.
Yes, sorry, apologies for lateness, Chair. Sorry, was that number 12, did you say?
I've just asked your first question on number 11, which, number 10. That Bethan's just going to ask, and then you can come in with the following question. Okay.
Okay. So,
Thank you.
Around capita, but there was a second part, wasn't there, in terms of...
Councillor Yo, would you like to ask your question on 10? Or would you like me to do it?
it's fine. Thank you, Chair. Morning, everyone. Again, apologies for lateness. So it's a question we had about the procurement process and actually the contract we got involved with Capita. So following that procurement exercise, Capita were appointed to design the scheme. Is there anything you can comment on the cost efficiency of the Capita contract and whether we think it achieved what we expected?
Okay, so I don't have the costs available to me, but I can come back and confirm that. Obviously, there were efficiencies offered because they'd undertaken the previous phases, so there was continuity in terms of delivery of service and their expertise. And they will continue to take us through to the design phase and drawing on additional expertise as needed. So they are performing as expected and delivering what is required, and given the specialist nature, we feel that they're fulfilling that element. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that's fine for me, thank you.
Councillor Yo, would you like to answer your next question, which is number 11?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So essentially moving on from that, the remaining 3 viable options were unaffordable within the existing budget. I mean, had we identified a preferred option out of those 3 before seeking further funding?
Sorry, I couldn't hear that clearly. Do you mind repeating the question?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So actually looking through the paper yesterday, there were the remaining 3 viable options that were given to us were unaffordable within the existing budget. So I guess we had a question about, had we identified a preferred option out of those 3 before seeking further funding?
And I am probably going to have to defer that one back, only because it was before my time. I don't know, Joe, if you can shed light on that one.
It was slightly before I had the portfolio, but if I remember, it was about, we went with the option that would give us the most opportunities to fulfil our master plan. So it was the option with the SEDS, being SEDS compliant, that new legislation that came in around that time.
Councillor Gordon. Over to you, Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Any unspent council funding currently profiled in year 2, 22-23? It says we carried over to support the works outline. Are we expecting an underspend?
Currently, I think that's marginal. Based on the officers and where we are, we're thinking pretty much a full commitment of spend. Obviously, there are still costs to be outlaid, so the carryover potentially is limited, but they're on profile to spend currently.
The next one's mine. 6.1. The original cost estimated associated with the construction of the SAB complement watercourse was a cost of £2.4 million in 19. Are we expected that this estimate of 2019 to have increased significantly, and when will we know if there will be an increase?
In terms of costs, yes, we're working off the assumptions based in 2019. There is a risk identified within the report that obviously reflective of material costs, etc., that we're seeing across the board. There could be an increase in cost. That would be determined at the point in which we tender, which would be in the autumn. So the intention is we'll have school planning or split planning in September, and then look to appoint contractors sort of at the tail end of the year going into next year. So once we have those detailed tender costs back in the autumn, that would give us then obviously a clear indication in terms of the budget.
Do you think there will be a clear indication that it will increase?
I don't think there'll be a clear indication that it will increase. I think it would be speculative. I think there's, a potential it could increase, but like I said, it's for the reasons that we're seeing that across the board. And then obviously we need to consider that in terms of the funding that's that's available, but we are working on the assumption that the budget we've got at the moment is sufficient to deliver.
Thank you, Bethany. Councillor Gordon.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, in the report it says the ENRAW funding, including the cost of the British project team, is available to June 2023, and the regeneration team are currently exploring options to ensure appropriate staff resource to support project delivery beyond June 2023. How confident are we that those things are going to be in place? Thank you.
Yes, so the funding is in place, like we said, until June, and we're working with the team. I'm pretty assured that there will be a staffing resource to ensure that that project continues to deliver on the programme that we're currently committed to doing. So, yes. I think we recognise it's a priority and it needs to be delivered. So, yeah, resource will be.
Councillor Yeo, would you like to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's actually just it's a continuation, if you like, of Cara's line of questioning. So, with is it NRAW or is that what you call it? Yeah. So, obviously, that NRAW available in the papers, at least, it suggests that funding is available until the end of June 2023. So, the question you have here is, if that funding isn't spent or isn't allocated before the end of June, I mean, is any match funding elsewhere at risk? And are we also at risk of funds being clawed back if we haven't spent or allocated them by the end of June?
My understanding is that funding is available for a specific use, and we're prioritising that funding to ensure full spend. So we do not foresee an underspend in terms of that funding, and it should be fully spent in line with the conditions of the funding.
I'm very glad to hear that. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bourne, would you like to come in?
Yeah, hello. The question I had was the VP Recycled grant is expected to be spent by March 2024. Is the spending on track for this? If not, or whatever's the situation with it, a variation letter would be required to extend the grant beyond March 24. Is this likely at this stage?
Okay. Again, I think it in part links back to the tendering of the solution, the construction phase, and the programme that they provide. It may be that we need to seek a variation from Welsh Government, which is a potential option, so that the staff are cited on that. And again, it would be a case of prioritising the use and allocation of that funding in advance of the council resources. So a case of prioritisation, ensuring we keep sort of a close eye in terms of what comes back by way of programme, and early conversations with Welsh Government around the opportunities, should they be required.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Bourne?
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
Thank you. So, following on, we've discussed the financial information. We move on to community engagement, and the first question is from Councillor Thomas.
Thanks, Chair. Do you review the community events to assess which have better attendance, receive more engagement from the community, and do you gather or have you got any feedback from these events?
So the team do sort of analyse the results that come back, and I think sort of broadly speaking on the most recent one, the interest from the community is very much sort of on the long-term vision of the plan and sort of what comes next in terms of activity. Obviously, the most recent one was on site investigations, which kind of is what it is, isn't it, in terms of the groundworks. I think there's probably a need, and I think it's important to ensure that we do continually review that and sort of adapt our approaches. So, if the drop-in events are not proving successful, that we look at alternatives. But I think most recently we had something like 50 people attend the drop-in events. So I think it's just about exploring alternative options, looking at the feedback in terms of effectiveness. I know there is a newsletter that's distributed. I guess there's potentially some more analysis around, do people read that? Is it more plausible to just do it online? Do we want to continue doing the dropouts? So I think it's just about a reflection of the approaches to date, and if something isn't working, how else can we best diversify?
Yeah, could you tell us when the last community event was, please?
So the last consultation event that the regeneration team did was in October 22, which was when we appointed the ground investigation specialist. So that was the last consultation event.
And was that well attended?
I believe that was the one that had around 50 people. So yeah, it was quite well attended over 2 days. And I think there's been a subsequent meeting with Idris as well, and the community. And I think that was the tail end of last year, but I wasn't in attendance. That one, apologies, I haven't got the exact date.
Okay. Just an add-on from Councillor Thomas. What age group is attending these events, please?
Don't have the detail off the top of my head. I know when I was there, it was predominantly sort of adults as opposed to sort of younger people. So that's perhaps something we need to look at in terms of reaching a broader demographic. So
are you implying it's the older generation, not the middle generation, the 30s and the 40s, that are getting involved in it, that will long-term see the prospects of what we're trying to currently do?
Yeah,
Come in, Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to add that when we did a kickstart, we relaunched our community engagement. We met outside, we met under the arch. Weather was absolutely awful, so thank goodness we were at the arch. So then we were picking up people who were just by chance walking past and, you know, enticing them over to have a conversation, look at the computer-generated photos, etc., and had leaflets and were surveying. So we were hitting more than just people who were going to turn up for a session in a hall then. And that way it was really it was a good event.
Thank you. So the next question comes from Councillor Nick Ball.
Yeah, sorry I am here then. Sorry about that. Yeah, the question I had was with regards to Garnteg School. You've listed that they've undertaken a litter pick in the area. Are we encouraging other schools to participate in these sort of things, and also secondary schools, do you think would benefit from using the area for geography?
I'm not sure how widely the team have sort of engaged sort of schools. I can certainly ask that question, but with the new officer on board and with us now until June, I certainly think there's opportunity to ensure that school engagement features quite high, especially with the new curriculum on board, where we're encouraging schools to sort of use their local environment. So I think there's clear alignment there and opportunity. So I'd certainly take that back as a recommendation if we aren't already doing so.
So before we come in, Dave, Councillor Liam Cowles has asked a question. This is based really kind of on what you've just been speaking about. Will more community drop-ins like this take place at the relevant stages of phase 1? And if so, are the aims to increase participation?
I think ongoing consultation engagement is critical in terms of that community. There's clearly a passion to see the site develop, so I think keeping the community informed and where there's opportunity for them to sort of be engaged at an early point as well, rather than sort of just communicating decisions that perhaps have been taken. So I think it's, you know, appropriate consultation in the appropriate format. So I think of recognition of the need to engage stakeholder groups closely as we move forward through those key milestones in terms of design, tender, implementation, etc. So yes, it'll absolutely be an ongoing activity they'll be seeking to get that buy-in, isn't it, in the view around aspirations moving forward.
Thank you. And it's over to you, Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. How do we advertise community and training activities, and are we involving council members on these?
My understanding is that a range of methods are being used. Obviously, we've mentioned that the newsletter, the social media, etc. But probably what we can do is request a more comprehensive plan in terms of the approach now for the outstanding time available to us, and ensuring members are engaged. I know there are members are kept informed. I know I've seen some correspondence this week, so perhaps it's just building that in a bit more of a robust plan for the remaining period.
Come in, Councillor George.
Thank you, Chair. If I can add that the ward members in Aberystwyth, the team, Ryland, communicates with them regularly, and they often give an opinion on a newsletter content, etc. as well.
So that follows on to my next question. Does the newsletter only go to the Aberystwyth residents? Is there scope to widen the reach? Have we sought the level of interest from the outside the area of Aberystwyth? And how is the newsletter sent to the residents? Is it well designed, containing the relevant timing issues? Now, from my point of view, being a member for Blaenavon, I'm sure that people from Blaenavon, from residents that visit Blaenavon come from other wards, would it not be appropriate that the majority of the residents of Torfaen were actually notified about what was going on up here, because people do travel to the British? And going back, how is the information delivered to those people just locally in Aberystwyth currently?
Okay. So my understanding is every resident within the Aberystwyth or every household receives a copy of the newsletter, so that's distributed to each household. Obviously, it's available as well on the council website, so it is available in an electronic format, which is obviously accessible to the wider community. It could be maybe an extension of that going forward in terms of wider promotion through social media to gain that wider reach, as you've pointed out. So the targeted intervention is direct to that community, but it is available digitally also.
Thank you. So over to Councillor Yowell, sorry.
That's right. I've been called worse. Thank you, Chair. So it's coming back to Idris, and I'm apologies again for missing the beginning of the meeting, but obviously somebody must have mentioned it. So yesterday, Dr. John Cox came to talk to the committee as we were sort of deliberating what to ask. And actually, John mentioned that they've been a quite successful, as far as he was concerned, engagement event with Idris in January. So it just made me wonder, now that we've engaged Idris, is the expectation that they will lead on future community engagement, or are we going to be sort of both the council and Idris engaging in separate and different ways?
I think it is a good point, and I think it's probably one for us to define. I think, given that we've been waiting for Idris to secure the funding to mobilise the feasibility studies, I think until that's sort of in place and secured, I think once that happens, that's when we can maybe plan in terms of the engagement. I think it'll have to be a consideration, I guess, to timelines as well, isn't it, in terms of what activity we are undertaking versus what Idris are undertaking, to ensure that either it's seamless. What we don't want is for us to hold off one level of engagement while something else is happening. So I think if there's opportunity to do it collaboratively, I think there's value in that, because it does demonstrate, doesn't it, that holistic approach across the site and how we're approaching it. But either way, I think there will need to be a level of engagement in terms of both elements of the project.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yesterday, when Dr. Cox was in, he mentioned that the British Liaison Committee hadn't met with the council for some time. Are you going to be re-engaging with them? I think they're quite a vital part of this project.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that point has been noted, the need to sort of work very closely with them. They're obviously quite representative in terms of the site. So absolutely. And I think now that we're at that point whereby that initial phase is finishing, we're moving towards design, I think it's quite timely in terms of re-engagement there to ensure, how we engage with them, what information we can share, how they want to be kept informed going forward. So I think absolutely that'll be an action that we'll take away. So
we come to the last question, but before we come to the last question, can I ask if any of the members would like to ask any more questions relating to the topic that we're talking about? So, are you happy, Councillor Yule? Did you need to answer any more questions?
No, I'm fine, thank you, Chair.
So the last question is, and I think it's quite important, this one. Are we confident that the sustainable aspirations for the British will be achieved in a timely and financially viable manner?
So So I think in the broader sense of the whole master plan is obviously an ambitious master plan with a level of detail still to be determined. In terms of the work streams that we are currently operating, I think there's a level of confidence that we can deliver to the timeline that we've outlined within the report. So that will certainly achieve an element and a contribution to the wider master plan. Similarly, with the Idris proposal, there is a robust timeline in place. I think the conclusion of the feasibility study then will inform the next steps. I think beyond that, we're sort of speculating in terms of what that might generate. So I think it's a case of wait and see what those feasibility studies throw up.
Bethan, thank you. I was going to say, would you like to come in, Councillor Gordon?
No, I don't think I've got anything else to add. I think Bethan summed that up nicely.
Thank you. Sorry, I say that again. Thanks, Bethan and Councillor Gordon, for the invitation, and you are now free to leave. Members, can I remind you that the meeting is still in formal proceedings, therefore we are still on webcast. Members can, if can, I refer you now to the scrutiny activity, the questions that invite to offer the recommendations. So I'll hand over to Rebecca, who will now formulate the recommendations of the members. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So if I can just remind members of the scrutiny activity. So you were asked to review the report today and assess whether the master plan and delivery mechanisms for development of the British site are fit for purpose, robust and progressing within a framework of comprehensive engagement with the local community. So can I ask for your recommendations? Do you want to break them up in terms of firstly progress, then any financial recommendations, and then community engagement ones?
I just think one of the recommendations should be that we are 100% engaging with Dr. Cox and the British Liaison Committee. I think that's a vital one for the future of this project, considering the fact they've been involved in it since day one, and they know exactly what the community want from it. So I think that should be put down.
I'd take that one step further. I think we should engage further than just the local area of Abersacan. I think we should engage with the north area of Torfaen, even to the south, because of the same reason. Because people do visit that area, and I think they should know more. Councillor Gordon?
Just on that, I'm all for sort of wider engagement. I think the sort of Bethan's response about a sort of digital consultation is fine there. We can't. I mean, we sat on this table still talking about costs, and I know we leaflet, we give hard copy to all the Abersacan ward residents. I don't think we can get into the business of doing hard copies to the entire borough, because I mean that becomes fiscally insane. So I think, you know, let's publish it on our sort of social media and website platforms, but where do you draw the line? I mean, Blaen Avenue interested, Cumbraan's interested, you know, you've got to call a halt sometime on a cost basis. Yeah.
I believe that Torfaen Talks is potentially coming straight back out, and if that's the case, is there an opportunity to get out an article into that to be able to tell the whole community?
If we're doing that as a part of a wider piece, but a bespoke hard copy communication about the British, I think is probably unnecessary to the whole borough.
Okay, so if I just quickly run through some notes, obviously these are your recommendations, so feel free to reject or accept any. In terms of progress, I didn't particularly pick up any points that would be recommendations, unless you do. So whether you're satisfied, obviously it's all dependent on the feasibility studies at this stage. In terms of the financial aspect, there was just the one with regards to the ENRAW funding and the staffing resources. So I didn't know whether you wanted to make a recommendation that is a priority for you, that those options are a priority for staffing of the British team. And then I had a few points that you've already raised on community engagement, so the need for continually reviewing the effectiveness of the methods of communicating with the public, analysis of the newsletter, you know, who's it reaching and whether it's being effective, reflection of their approaches to date, and also looking to reach a broader demographic in terms of age groups as well.
Yeah.
There was a point about school engagement. She recognised that more could be done on engaging with schools, especially with regards to the new curriculum now being rolled out across Wales. And you raised the issues about the newsletter, and Councillor Thomas raised the point about engaging more with the British Liaison Group again. So that's the only points I had, Chair.
Does anybody else have any?
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm happy with all that. I think whether in the wording we could think about something about how taking this progress report as an opportunity for the council to reset the engagement. So I think what would be quite useful if we can actually sort of get across that we think it's the council needs to work to ensure that the local community are the champions of this project, and that actually that they are the ones who are making the case for it. Because at the end of the day, if they're not interested or there's not sufficient interest from the people with on the doorstep, it's not going to be terribly successful, I don't think. But it's more about thinking about the wider issues about the community's approach to various services we're talking about. I think it's also important we start thinking actually that these projects are also community-led, and it's all about how the community champions this project, and whether we could use this as a bit of a test case to see whether that approach works.
Thank you. I think there was a couple of questions that she's needing to come back to us to be able to make those answers. And what were those? Can you remember?
Sorry, Chair. So those points will be added to the action sheet for further information for you. So there was the technical information about the water contamination and the soil report, which will be published at the end of March. There was the information on the cost of the Capita contract, and there was detail about the preferred option that's funding was sought for out of the three options that weren't viable because of costings originally. So there's three action points, so they'll be on the action sheet, and I'll get that information to you as soon as I can.
So are we all kind of in favour of just more community engagement to be able to move this process forward, or is that something that we need to be looking at?
Yeah, I think so. I think the community engagement's kind of fallen by the wayside. I think the pandemic, clearly, and I think some sort of senior personnel changes within the council haven't helped that. But, you know, I know that the sort of Director Head of Communities, Mr Leach, is very keen to and has a track record of engaging with sort of community groups and the British Liaison Group in particular. So I hope that kicks off. Expanding on Councillor Yowell's point, I think it needs to be a bit more structured. Let's have a look at what that looks like. We can't just say, well, we promised to liaise. Well, what does that look like? What form does that take? The liaison group can be sort of invited to various committees or whatever, so I want to see what that looks like, because it's all right saying we will liaise, but I mean, what does that mean? Yeah. Is it meaningful engagement and liaison, you know? I haven't got a silver bullet for that, but...
Maybe you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. On a serious note, I'm a little concerned with the financial side of things. Bearing in mind we've had this site now since 2016, and we've spent, forget the pandemic, we've had it for 3 years before the pandemic, and we've spent £1.2 million on surveys. So I think we need some sort of recommendation on closer scrutiny on what's being spent and what is actually being done at the British. For me, that's a lot of money on surveys and staff. And if we're serious, because that's the thing, if we're serious about the British, then we need to actually get serious and put something in. So if we could perhaps look at that, that's a big thing for me.
That's good.
If I can, Chair.
Yeah, sure. Sorry.
sorry, Carl.
That's
I mean,
okay.
I'm happy with that, but I think it's important. Actually, there might be a caveat or two in there. But I am not a public. I really have no idea about public procurement and the vicissitudes of the last 7 years. But there are going to be issues there about some of those added costs are potentially unavoidable. But I think whether we actually put it in there, if there's a recommendation here that we want the councils to be much more conscious of monitoring what potentially are unnecessary or unavoidable costs in terms of the projects. I think it's very important. It's very important that we have a greater understanding of just. Let's be perfectly honest about it. The public procurement system is snarled up and it's very bureaucratic, and there are issues and sort of avenues we've gone down as corporately. I imagine that we just have to do because that's a fact of life. So I'd support Councillor Thomas's line of line here, but I think it's important we add the caveat that it's about making sure we're monitoring that there is as little as possible unnecessary or unavoidable spend.
Thank you.
Unnecessary or unnecessary or avoidable, not unavoidable. But Rebecca's cleverer than me, so I'm sure you'd have picked it up in the drafting.
Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, following off from Councillor Thomas's point, I mean, to most people, £1 million, to me included, is an eye-watering sum of money, and I certainly haven't got that in my bank account. I've never seen that much in one place at one time. However, you know, that's an eye-catching amount, and it's quotable, and I'm sure Councillor Thomas will quote it. But we're dealing with a site with historical issues around sort of watercourses, tip, spoil, underground works, you name it. It's very sort of architecturally unstable, if you like. So there has been the need for these surveys, and I don't know enough about the technicalities of that, but I'd rather spend that money ensuring the place is completely safe for the further development we want to make on it, because we can't cut corners on these surveys if somebody falls down an abandoned mine shaft, because we'll be sued for a lot more than £1 million. So like I say, I don't know the sort of headlines on how that money's been spent, but I'm happy to sort of entrust that officers are spending it wisely. On the face of it, it's £1 million, it's a lot of cash, but I'd rather spend it now than sort of start developing a site which has some longer term, more fundamental issues that should have been addressed right at the beginning.
Before you come in, I really do agree with you on that, and I'm looking now at the long-term future of it and where it goes into the future generations and how we move it forward, and we've got to make it safe for the generations coming forward. And if it's going to cost the amount of money that it has cost currently right now, moving forward it's going to even cost more, and long-term we're making it safer for the generations that come after us. Would you like to come in, Tom?
Yeah. I'm not saying the money spent hasn't been done for the right reasons, and what we need to remember is, if you have read the original reports, when we bought the British, we were told that we knew exactly what the risks were. What I'm saying is we need to keep an eye on the cash.
If I just come in there quickly, Chair, as well, obviously any further fundings, depending on the amounts, would either go to the exec member for a decision to be made, or if it's a more significant amount of money, it would come back to you as council as well. But obviously in terms of a committee, I will still recommend that that is something that you want to keep a monitor on.
Councillor Nick Byrne, do you want to add to anything to what we've been talking about?
No, I was just going to mention, obviously, what you said with regards to making it safe. There already has been one fatality up there back in I think it was the late 80s, early 90s, where a boy fell down a mine shaft. Obviously, we don't want a repeat of that whatsoever. So that's all I wanted to add.
Thank you. Yeah. Do we have anything else that we'd like to add to this? No? Okay. So we move over to item 6, which is the item for the next meeting. Rebecca, can you introduce the report?
Yeah, so if I introduce the report at item 6 there, this is the report where you consider the item that you'd like to scrutinise at your next meeting. At the visioning session you held back last summer, you selected the multi-agency pupil intervention item, which is looking at community safety, antisocial behaviour, etc., and interventions in schools. You, as the Prosperous Committee, you also have a role as the Crime and Disorder Committee, so you do need to take a crime and disorder item each year. So can I ask, are you still happy to take that? There haven't been any audit referrals, and there's nothing on the exec forward plan that is more of a priority. There's the future of the springboard, which obviously you took as an item back last October, and there's the canal, which you didn't select at visioning. So you're still happy to take the MAPI as your next item?
With the agreement of all members, I'm happy to move that forward.
And then, thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then jumping ahead slightly, you didn't allocate a specific item to the last meeting of the cycle, which is in May. You've selected 4 items in your basket as sort of floating items. They were employability, economy and skills, food economy, and the canal action plan. Now, you have done quite a fair bit on employability, and the economy and skills strategy you took twice back in the previous committee. I know the food economy was something you were very keen on in visioning, but obviously, and there's the canal action plan. So it's up to you as a committee to decide really which items you have a preference for. Like I said, there's nothing at the moment in the audit referrals or the exec forward plans. I think there's quite a lot going on in the world of food economy at the moment.
Sure. I think there's been a lot of changes in the demographics of businesses over the last 12 months because the business is closing when I'm doing food. I think it's potentially something that we could have a look at in more detail.
Oh, sorry, Kit. What's the other option? The canal, is it?
So it was. I mean, if you want it, sorry, I didn't have my mic on then. So it was employability, economy and skills strategy, food economy, and the canal action plan. It determined what are you looking to get out if you were determine if you're trying to decide between the canal action plan. Is it just an update you want on that? Because that could be something that could go to a seminar more than actual scrutiny activity, or did you specifically want to scrutinise it?
Myself personally, I would like to scrutinise the canal, but that's just me. It depends what others think about that.
Final question, Rebecca. I'm not going to disagree with you necessarily. Just don't yet. When was the last time that the canal came before the committee? Do you remember? Because I'm just thinking if it's something that comes fairly regularly, I'm not quite sure what there is to update on. But also, because again, I wasn't at the visioning committee last summer. When you talk about the food economy, I mean, that sounds quite broad to me. Exactly what are we thinking about? So I'd just like a better idea about what that would entail before I express a preference.
So in terms of the canal, that last came to committee. It was a joint committee between the Prosperous Committee and the Cleaner Communities Committee, and that came in February 21. Now, I believe it also went to their visioning, but they didn't select it at all as an item for this year. You put it in your basket as a potential. With regards to the food economy, if I just bring up the visioning information, bear with me 2 seconds.
But so is food in one way or the other. When Rebecca's just looking at that, I think the overall kind of vision of where Torvine are going currently with bringing tourists into the area and bringing locations into it, it's locations in the north of the borough and the south of the borough. Whether those people come in, they need accommodation, they need to eat, and everything else. I don't think, I'm not sure if we've actually discussed this in the profile before, and that's why I'm steering towards that more so than the other, because it's in the vision. We've got in the south of the borough, we've got all those things happening, which is about food. And in the north, I don't know if anybody else thinks the same, I don't know.
So it was put forward in the scope of food resilience and the food economy in Torvine. And the reason for putting it forward was with the cost of living crisis, the access to good, sustainable, healthy, affordable food is essential. The food industry is also a key employer from farm to plate. Through the Community Renewal Fund, Torvine with its partners has undertaken research looking at business, community and supply chains to inform future interventions in the local food market to bolster and improve and increase our food supply. So scrutiny would be asked to review the effectiveness of the work done to date, review the outputs of the research to date, identify areas for improvement and review the proposed shared prosperity project.
I'm fully aware that in Blanavon we have a large cheese factory that's currently making people redundant because of the change of resources of food in the area. So that could potentially be something on the topic. You know, they are reducing it because of the factories moving its plants. And I think I think things are changing within the food industry. It's getting tougher.
Okay, thanks both. So it's a mixture of actually the food economy and food industry, but also access to food at the same time. So it's basically, it can be a grab bag across a variety of things and what our role is within them. Yeah.
Totally agree. I think it's about the businesses, the industry and the culture around food. I think that's where we are, aren't we? Yeah.
Just on the food economy one, would that sort of encompass things like food shares and sort of cooperative, grow your own and share and all this type of, on that basis, and the wider sort of more holistic approach, I'd favour the food economy, if that's what you want to frame it as.
Totally agree, Councillor Gordon.
I agree with you. I agree with Carl then. I think I'll look to that one.
I will go away, Councillor Thomas. I'll make some inquiries about the Canal Action Plan as well and see how much of a priority that is, where we are, and I'll get back to you with some more information on that. And if you want to change your mind, then obviously this is the next meeting after the next one, so you can still change your mind on that. So I will get some further information on where we are with that Canal Action Plan for you, okay?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy with that. I would like to know a little bit about what's happening with the canal. I think that's a big deal, and it's a big deal for the residents of Torvine, and it creates a lot of interest. So, but I'm easy. I'll go with the majority.
And like I said, if it's just more a case of further information and updates, it might be for a seminar for all members. Then, yeah. Okay. Thanks.
So, the agenda item number 7 is the date of the next meeting, which is the 23rd of March. I thank you all for attending this and contributing to this meeting. The meeting is now closed. Thank you, guys.
Cheers, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.